Hi guys, and welcome to Not Just Business. I'm your host, Derek Peed. This series is where we talk about the people side of being in business. After all, people are what makes the world so interesting. We don't often think of the founders of legal firms or consulting firms or other professional groups such as doctors as entrepreneurs. But of course, they have the same challenges and even more other difficult challenges in starting their businesses and managing professionals. My guest today is Paul Zondagh, co-founder and chief executive of True South Actuaries and Consultants. Good morning, Paul. Welcome to the show.
Morning, Derek.
So, Paul, how long have you been in business now? My calculation should be close to 20 years.
Yes, the dream was birthed towards the end of 1999. Mm-hmm. So at the start of 2000, we left the safety or the relative perceived safety of the corporate environment and started our own business. So in our 20th year.
So, you mentioned you left the safety of big business. With your career, your profession as an actuary and a firm of actuaries, you guys as the founders could have certainly been probably at the top of life insurance companies of your choice if you had gone the corporate route. What made you decide to go the route of your own business? And who did you have to convince?
I think at the time, looking back on that decision, we, both Francois, Hugo, who's my business partner, and myself, we were barely 30. So looking back, we were, at that age, you invincible and you fearless. And looking back, you obviously had very little wisdom. So it was a gut decision, very much. Didn't take much convincing ourselves to go our own way. Speaking for myself, in the corporate environment, I'm not political enough, or I don't enjoy politics that much to probably have had a good career had an enjoyable career in the corporate world. Doing our own thing is enjoyable in the sense, and what the dream was, you can play golf on a Wednesday afternoon. Mm-hmm. Fact is, we've never played golf on a Wednesday afternoon, but at least in your mind, you set out that you'll have the flexibility to do that if you can. I think more what transpired was that we can tweak the business in the way that we think best. In a corporate environment, you don't have that much. It's not as easy in a big environment.
I suppose I'm somewhat of an entrepreneur myself. I often have to think really hard about what day it is today, It's not like, well, this is Sunday, this is a day off, or this is Saturday. I can do my own thing. Yes, I try to fit in a game of golf every now and then. When people ask me, when are you going on holiday? I say, what's that? It's been a long time. I haven't been on holiday since I retired, and that was 10 years ago. But anyway, so how's your journey been so far as an entrepreneur, as a firm?
Yeah, it's been an incredible ride. Where we are today, we've got our share of commercial success, but there's been tough times. We started out like every consulting firm where you essentially just do projects. So you've got the cash flow boom and then a bust season again. So that's how we started up. It took a while. It took years to build annuity cash flows that takes that stress away the cash flow stress away. So we certainly had that. We had tough times. Overall, I look back, it's been an incredible ride, as I said. Wouldn't have wanted any other way. And where we are today, I think we just stuck to the basics all along. And I think that's a big part of why we are where we are today.
So when you started out, what was the dream? And what did you intend to achieve but didn't?
So part of this decision process back when we started out, which was probably not as structured as you would expect from actuaries and planned as you would expect. Thinking back, we didn't really have this big dream, this castle in the air that was already designed and architecturally designed. We certainly wanted to be successful, run our own business, have the freedom that comes with that, enjoy what we do. I think that was probably the bumper sticker that was sort of across it all. Just enjoy what you do. And we achieved that. It's certainly been enjoyable. With stress, the stress is different than in a corporate environment. I think the main difference between a smaller environment and the bigger environment is the fact that in the smaller environment, you're just so much more aware of the client. In a big corporate, and I was in an insurance company, you sit inside a corporate head office and somewhere out there, someone will sell a policy today and you will be paid at the end of the month. You don't have to worry about that. In the smaller environment, that link is so much closer. It's so much more direct. So that's the difference that we picked up on pretty quickly. But we are doing our own thing. We enjoy it. I don't think there's anything that we didn't achieve that we set out to achieve.
So were there any unexpected positive spin-offs? In other words, when you started out, you didn't foresee that there would be this benefit of running your own business.
Yeah, I think the big thing was on the social side of the business. The business, and we can get to that later, but the business has a very intentional social footprint. And when we started out, we were actuaries, so we were dreaming of working, calculations for insurance companies. And today, where we're at and the journey, we had so much freedom to get involved around our business in the social context intentionally. And it's been a massive part at the end of every year when we look back. It's a big part of what sort of makes your heart jump for joy. We didn't plan that, or we didn't expect that, but it's been an incredible fringe benefit of being in an environment where we can effectively make the calls. For instance, if there's an opportunity or a need to do something in the community around us and it resonates with who we are, we've got the freedom to do that. Certainly, big firms do a lot of good in the environments where they operate, but the ability for an individual to direct that to something that resonates with you personally, with me personally, would have been far less. And it's an exceptional benefit that we have that we didn't anticipate, didn't think of.
So, Paul, what are your values, A, as a person, and B, as an organization?
So personally, I have a biblical worldview, and in the business, that's probably very closely aligned to that. Our values as a business, the two pillars we defined as integrity and excellence. Integrity in the wider sense, that pretty much governs if there's an opinion or a decision to be made. The automatic discussion item that comes up in the business is, does this pass the integrity test? And you can Google this. There's a couple of very interesting questions that you can ask to unpack the integrity suitcase, the mirror test, the lamppost test, etc. So that is...
A couple that I can think of come to mind is, would you be happy if your children found out about this? Would you be happy if to be published in the press? Yeah. What you did, all that kind of thing. Oh.
Yeah, so it makes it very real, those questions. And in fact, I have a list of, I think it's 11 of them, readily accessible on my laptop. Because just going through that, if you have to make a decision, it jogs the mind and helps you to see a different perspective. Because quite often, we all, I think, have a dose of, more or less, but a dose of subjectivity in us. If you're close to the fire to make the right decision, you sometimes just need that structure to stand back and get that perspective, get a different perspective. But so for the business, integrity is a key pillar, and the other one is excellence. So previously we phrased that, we coined a new term, super pleasing our clients, super please. But that fell by the wayside in a collective democratic process in the business. So it became excellence. So we believe that we serve our clients with excellence. What we provide to them, whether that's a presentation or just a result with backing evidence or a report, it must be excellent. You must, in times to come, you must be able to come back to that. Let's say it's a report, and look at it and think, wow, we did well there. So those are our two values for the company.
I suppose, you're consultants and you give companies advice, and sometimes I would imagine the message is not well received and there might be a tendency to shoot the messenger, or we don't like your answer, can you give us another answer? Does that happen, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's very topical right now because we've just been replaced as the actuaries to one of our clients in another jurisdiction, so it's not in South Africa. Since we started out as the actuaries a handful of years back, We warned them about this one feature in their product set, and it permeated the entire product set. And in the economy, the ability to invest appropriately so that they matched from a balance sheet perspective. They couldn't do that. So all along, we warned them about this toxic feature. You need to get rid of it. You need to get rid of it. For the first few years, their economy played along and they didn't get into trouble. In 2019, unfortunately, the yield curves started dropping. So suddenly there was a balance sheet issue. So, we alerted them. We alerted the regulator. We did a mid-year evaluation for them, showed that there's a capital injection required, actually quite a sizable capital injection. And then we were promptly replaced with another firm. So yes, it does happen. I think the test for us is, from a professional perspective, if I go back to the integrity test, it's very easy to just close my eyes. In my mind's eye, I see myself in a few years from now into the future and sitting at sort of a hearing at the Actuarial Society of South Africa where something has gone wrong and taking this, and did we do the right thing? And that always makes it so clear. So in this instance, finding an argument to increase the valuation rate would have been so easy, but it would have been professionally so wrong. So you just need to stick to your guns. So we lost a client, and that is sad because we had good rapport with them other than this. But, we stand proud. If any question being asked about this, I think we're quite convinced that we did exactly the right thing.
Yeah, of course. Well, we've seen instances, of course, with some of the big consulting firms suddenly getting a bad rep because of what some of the people did, or turned a blind eye to, or tolerated, or may have been coerced into doing things differently to keep a big account. One's got to admire that you stood up for what's right.
In the South African environment, the change in the regulatory regime of the insurance regime, what was previously the statutory actuary was probably more of I had to call it a backroom role, but it was more of a technical role, whereas the head of the actuarial function in the new regime is clearly an advisor to the board, and the board relies on this as one of the control function heads for them to make the right decisions to manage their company in the way that the regulator requires of them. And it happens that you have news that things are not quite as it should be. It happens. And the trick, I think, in the new regime is, for a doctor, we all know what we talk about when we say that a doctor has a good bedside manner. Mm-hmm. I think in the new world, it's actually quite important now suddenly for the actuary to have a good board-side manner. Mm-hmm. To be able to pick up an issue or potential issue. In that meeting, you've got the board, you've got management, and, you must deal with it tactfully, but decisively. It doesn't come easy. I think depending on your personality profile, you need to be intentional about how you do it.
One of the things that I used to enjoy as a client of yours several years ago was that you guys managed to take very complex subject matter and put it into language that ordinary people could understand. I think it was Einstein who said, if you can't explain it in simple terms, you don't understand it well enough. So I find that in documents and the way people speak, trying to impress others, they use overly flowery English. Sometimes you have to really dig into what are they actually saying. People don't really speak simple English anymore. And I think that they think that if they speak simple English, they will be assumed to be idiots. You've got to use flowery language to be taken seriously. And I have to chuckle to myself whenever I see this. But anyway, so how do you manage to keep your documents and your explanations, presentations in such simple language whenever you are dealing with complicated subjects?
That's, I think, one of the benefits of being in a consulting firm where we're not overly driven by the financial side of it. We intentionally spend the extra time to make sure we get to that point. Whether it's a report or a presentation, I always use the analogy, if you, we live in Cape Town and you see many pictures that people take from Blouberg of Table Mountain. And some of those are crisp. It's a beautiful picture. You can see all the detail. And then some of them are, not crisp. It's just a plain bad photo. Beautiful setting, but a bad photo or a bad representation of that. And I believe that whether it's a presentation, whether it's a report, whether it's just a discussion at a meeting, if you can't use presentation for purposes of the example, if it's not crisp, like that photo of Table Mountain from Blouberg, firstly, it's not crisp because it hasn't clicked in your own mind yet. And secondly, your audience probably going to lose them. So why bother? Why waste the time? Spend the extra time to get it to that degree of crispness where it really makes sense. So we would often have, early in a project, we would have discussions, and if it's evident early on in the discussion that, the team working on it, that they haven't got it crisp in their own minds, we just go back to the drawing board. Let's reconvene tomorrow when we thought about this a bit more so that we can explain this. Once it's crisp in your own head, the youngsters that start here, they probably hate us for it, but it works. If you have to report something, once you've dumped that initial bulk onto paper, recent graduates, they think they're done when they've done that. Then they're always shocked if we tell them, okay, now you've done 20% of the work. Now you need to sit back, look at what you've dumped on paper, because in your mind it's crisp. You understand what you're saying there. Mm-hmm. But the reader, are there obvious questions that he or she is going to ask? Why haven't you answered that? Does it make sense? Look at the table of contents. Does it tell the story? So there's stuff like that. Is the report itself beautiful? There's a saying, it was an architect that said it, and we had it on our website for many years. But if it ain't beautiful, it's not done yet. And that's the way we view these things. It must be crisp, it must be beautiful, then you're done.
I'm reminded of somebody who said, and I can't remember who it was, I'm sorry that this letter is so long. I really didn't have the time to make it short. And there's a lot of truth in that, obviously.
Yes. No, we often spend a lot of time that is, in our terminology, not billable to the client, right at the end, let's say in the process of finalizing a report, where it takes iterations to get that report to that final crisp state. And we pick that up ourselves because it makes us tick to walk out of a meeting where a director tells you, a non-executive, wow, for the first time I now understand it. This is like, solvency for dummies. Thank you. It makes us tick. It's part of the joy for us. So,
Absolutely. There's a lesson there for lots of people. So you obviously employ highly skilled, technically qualified people. How big is your staff now, by the way? I forgot to ask.
So the headcount is 20 odd. So depending on your perspective, it's very small or medium-sized. But in terms of the actuarial fraternity, it's one of the second-tier consulting firms. Obviously, we've got the global firms, the audit firms that we compete with, and they would have bigger staff complement on the actuarial side than we do. But there's a lot of benefit for us in being small. We certainly don't have any ego drive to get to 50 or 100 or 200 people. If we do end up there, it'll happen by itself, but we're not driving for that.
So how difficult is it to manage professionals?
Very difficult, because you're working with intelligent people who have opinions, strong opinions often. That's one of the learnings of our line of business, I think, and consulting specifically. Where you don't have consensus around an approach to a project or to a problem statement, let's say, you need to allow the different opinions to come onto the table, to enter the discussion. And I strongly believe that smart people don't, proverbially speaking, don't drown. So if you have a smart individual and you throw him or her at a client problem and you step back, their independent thought and their ability to reduce whatever the problem statement is into manageable components and take it from there and to come with a proposed solution based on that, that works.
I think it was Tom Peters, the old management guru, who wrote In Search of Excellence and other books. There was that one quote of his I enjoyed. If two people think exactly alike, fire one of them. Duplication is expensive. So you have very well qualified people who have strong opinions. Have you ever reached a point where the differences of opinion are irreconcilable, or do you manage to find a way?
Yeah, you mostly find a way. I think in the few situations where you get to a opposing approaches, let's say, to a problem statement. The tiebreakers are normally, as I said, integrity and excellence. Now, integrity, that doesn't often come into play with, in terms of professional approach, although it does in certain instances. But the excellence is often a good tiebreak. If we take this approach, is the board going to understand it? Is it going to make sense? Does this fundamentally solve the problem better, or the question? Is it a better answer to the question than the alternative? And then we've had instances where the ultimate tiebreaker is, I'm going to be the one who sits in front of the board and I need to explain this to them. So we can't come to an agreement. So I'll pick, I'll have the casting vote. And that has happened.
Okay. Given that, how do you encourage independent thinking by your staff?
We would nurture someone to the point where they've got enough of a feel for our way of doing things, for our DNA, and then you would start throwing them in the deep. And smart people don't drown. They'll figure it out on their own. They can come and check stuff, obviously, but they're left to independently figure something out with guidance as they then draw upon.
So you obviously have quite a fairly young team overall. What do you think millennials look for when they choose a place to work?
If I could answer another question that you haven't asked, a challenge we have with what I understand to be part of the worldview of millennials is this desire to go from the one job to the other one in fairly rapid succession. We as a firm find that quite tough to deal with, and I don't have an answer yet, because if I see a CV of someone who's now been working for 5 years and they've already had 4 jobs or 4 different employers, and now they want to come to True South to make a big impact here, I cringe, because that means that, I'm going to probably have, in all likelihood, 12, 18 months with this individual. And it's going to take me 12 months to just get him or her to understand the way we do things. Mm-hmm. So for me to make that investment and then shortly thereafter, or while I'm busy with that, to lose the individual, that's tough. That's a problem we haven't cracked yet. What I think we have cracked is the graduates who join us, they want the freedom to do things in a way that makes sense. And a very good example, we had a very smart individual, and he's still with us, joining us a few years back. And within the first year that he was with us, he's a kite surfer. He came to us and said, well, Mauritius is one of the best kite surfing spots in the world. He would like to work from there. And we said, okay, well, sure. Go figure out how it can work. You need to figure out the legal requirements, the visas, all of that. If it can work, it can work. Then we'll support it all the way. They went across, they had a wonderful time. They returned recently. But I think that kind of flexibility is important to employees generally. But for the millennials, it's more important. They attach more weight to that. We've got a similar case study at the moment. So I think that flexibility, given that we're a small company, we can do that. We don't have rigid rules because there's thousands of people. And if you make one exception, then a lot of other people will jump onto the bandwagon. So flexibility is the one thing. And then the other thing that is, I think, important is True South is not only about satisfied clients and, the good track record and the excellent word of mouth that's out there. It's also about the good things we do, the social footprint that we have that's intentional around the business. So to join a business, to join an employer where it's not just about your 8 to 5 job, but there's purpose to it. This is a business that impacts the community around it intentionally. I think that resonates quite well with youngsters and has probably seen us being able to retain them better than what would have been the case otherwise.
That brings me to your social responsibility projects, and I know you guys have been involved in all sorts of things. Tell us a bit about them.
Yeah, so I think it's always been part of the DNA from both founding partners' side. The flagship program at the moment probably is our intern program, where we take matriculants from disadvantaged communities and they join us for anywhere between 1 and 3 years. And in that period, we assist them with training into whatever their field of interest might be. We place them as hands that can provide capacity with, various NGOs that we have links with. So after this stint of, as I said, between 1 and 3 years, you've got, a youngster that matriculated and had the prospect probably of a very high unemployment rate amongst their peers for themselves as well. But 3 years down the line, they've got a real qualification. And we've got a big focus on not just throwing money at training, but intentional training, so that there's a very high likelihood of employment after the process. So you've taken someone and you've just changed, the future for that individual. And that is so satisfying. We started it in 2006. The program has grown. We've learned a lot, paid some school fees along the way, obviously. And we've had some brilliant successes. One of the early successes was someone who joined us and eventually ended up as a bookkeeper with our accountants. Another young lady went on to becoming a dispatching clerk at Clicks. She was so proud when she came back to us when she won the Dispatching Clerk of the Month award, shortly after joining them. Depending on the circles in which you discuss this, it may sound like nothing much, but to change that one life at a time is frustrating because it's one at a time, but it's also incredibly satisfying to look back over the years now and to see, it's a growing number of lives that you impact, that you changed. So I think there's an opportunity, and that's what we did. We sort of, as a business, just looked at, what have we got in our hand? What can we do to make a difference? Because in our country, we've got such incredible income disparities. We've got such high unemployment. We've got young people getting a matric, but without any real prospect of a real job. And I think we as a business engaged that problem head on, and it's frustrating because it's so slow, but we're very satisfied about the impact that we can and do make.
Okay, that's interesting. So, and from what I heard earlier, it sounds as if your millennial kind of staff also enjoy getting involved in those projects.
We talk about that in the business, so they know what the business does, the impact that we have. And on an annual basis, as a business, there's a formula of how much money you can donate to 18A registered charities. Every employee has the opportunity to nominate a charity, and then we take that amount that the tax authorities allow us, and we donate a share of that to charities nominated by the employees. So we get them involved. Yeah, it's not a business that's just about the business. There's more to it.
I know you have a large family. How do you balance your sort of work and family commitments with the demands of your business?
Yeah, that's a challenge, especially if between Francois and myself, the buck stops here. So while we go to great lengths to make sure that we have a family culture, we don't expect someone to, spend 16 hours a day, 4 months on end. Yes, there is the odd occasion where the project needs to be completed and the client wants the result tomorrow, so, you need to put in the hours. That certainly does happen. But we're very intentional about not allowing that to become the culture of doing that, all the time. Very intentional. So balancing it, I think, is something that we try to lead by. It is tough, but we try to lead by example. I would intentionally sometimes, leave the office early. We don't lead by example of being here first and leaving last, as an example. But yeah, the client in the end is the one that pays the salaries, that makes it all possible. So quite often, in the evenings, you open up the laptop again after you spend time with the kids and at home, and you do it again. So it is tough. But like everything else in life, you just need to be intentional about it. And over time, as we grow older and wiser, it is becoming easier to balance these.
The world seems to be changing at an ever-increasing rate. You mentioned some of the technology changes before we started this interview that you've seen. Certainly in the financial services industry, regulation has been increasing, and there's always something new that needs to be implemented or done, or new standard to be implemented. How do you keep up? I mean, I'm on the board of a company and it's a part-time job, obviously. It's a non-executive position. And I get the stuff presented to me at board meetings. If you have to keep yourself up to date, what do you do?
Yeah, that's a challenge. And I think it's quite topical sort of in the time where we're now, because we've just come out of many years of SAM implementation, the change in the regulatory regime. And now we slap bang in the middle of getting the IFRS 17 accounting regime implemented. So certainly it's been a busy decade that we've just had. The first few years of the new decade will be equally busy. So it is tough, and it is something that we need to balance carefully. I think there's a lot of noise, and to reduce from the noise to what the real stuff are that you need to attend to. That has been part of our recipe that worked for us. But yeah, it's tough to keep up. There's lots of new things coming all the time, but you have no choice. That is ticket to play.
What advice would you give to young people considering starting their own business, especially in your industry?
We get lots of actuaries who are in corporate employment and are considering going out doing something on their own. Generically, I think there's 2 points that I tend to make in each of these chats. One is that it's probably going to take longer to establish yourself than you initially think. I mean, for us, we were very bullish about our ability to establish a strong brand quickly. And it took years before the phone started ringing on an inbound basis, not us calling out. So be realistic about that. Whatever you think is your timeline to establish yourself and to build an income stream, just stress test that. What's going to happen? What are you going to do if it takes double that amount of time or 50% more? Can you hold your breath for that long? So I think that's a key risk management decision or tool that, someone starting out, you need to consider that. And the second one, then we have seen instances of people leaving corporate employment, going out, and then for whatever reason, it doesn't happen fast enough or it's not quite what they expected and they hop back into corporate employment. It's important up front to just go easy on yourself and to realize that there's a chance that this won't work out and that you may hop back into a corporate environment. Don't see that as failure. It's part of life's journey. If that's the way your path goes, don't end up with massive emotional hang-ups around the fact that you failed. You went out and it failed. Deal with it up front. There's a possibility around that. Think it through so that if it does happen, you deal with it easier without getting the hang-ups.
Thank you. So, Paul, thanks very much for your time and for your inputs. I'm sure there are a lot of people that are going to find that very interesting, and especially in your industry. For our listeners out there, if you wish to get in touch with either Paul or myself, you can email me at Derek, D-E-R-E-K, at DerekPeed. Just add P-E-A-D onto the end of that, .org. Pop me a mail, and if you have any questions or if you need any advice, we'll be happy to get back to you. Thank you very much. This has been another episode of Not Just Business, and I'm Derek Peed. Enjoy your day.